And then, so
Okay.
will I get a link to the recording? Is that what it is you're recording it on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will send you a link, Jacob.
Yep. So, welcome to Jacob Campbell's dissertation defense. He's going to uh, tell us about his participatory action research project that he engaged in. And before we get on to that, I'd like to uh, introduce the committee members, and then we'll move into Jacob's presentation. Then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers, comments from the committee. So it's sort of a dialogue with Jacob and the committee, and then time permitting, we might be able to have some other questions from outside of the committee. And then the committee will go into a breakout room to quote unquote deliberate. That's what it's called, I guess. And then come back and make an announcement. So that's the agenda. So I'm Michael Rafanti. I'm the chair of Jacob's committee, and I've known Jacob for a while, since he took I think it was from the Ecology of Ideas course a few years ago. And we formed a good connection. And then I think he was in the methods comp course, maybe with me. And since we're both educators in the state of Washington, there was a really good connection there. So I've been at CIS as an adjunct for about 18 years. And my day job is as the Dean of Education at Antioch University. And I live in Tacoma, Washington. And I think that's probably enough about me for now. So, Karubo, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. I am Karubo Abuya. I am currently in Kenya, born and raised in Kenya, but I consider myself a global citizen. I came to CIS as adjunct faculty in 2021. Although I'm not teaching classes now, I support students, with their dissertations. I am an organizational change leadership scholar practitioner. I am also an educator. I wear other hats as a human rights activist. So I'm actually a scholar activist as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Actually Michael reached out to me and Jacob to support this work because I'm a passionate participatory action researcher. So it's been wonderful to walk this journey with you, Jacob, and the rest of the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing your expertise in PAR to this committee. It's been great. And Doug.
Good morning, y'all. And Jacob, first of all, just the early round of congratulations for all your hard work and both what preceded you starting your doctoral program, because I feel like that always shows up in your writing and your research, and of course all the hard work you did. So I'm Doug Judge. I also live in Seattle. I live in Washington State. Special educator, so I have that connection with Jacob. Also started my career in social work, which is where I met Michael many years ago, working in schools, and subsequently my area of research and practice as a the doctoral level and professionally is really rooted in school-based trauma and resilience interventions, and so that's kind of my area of work. I currently work for a nonprofit in Washington State called the Center for High School Success under Stand for Children, which was formerly known as the Children's Defense Fund, Settlements Civil Rights Organization. So that's what I do now, and it's a real honor to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Jacob, so I'll turn it over to you, and I'm sure you'll want to, as part of your presentation, you'll be sort of sharing a little bit about yourself. So please feel free to, if you want to share, whenever you're ready to share your PowerPoint. Great.
Awesome.
Then I would ask, oh wait, before we get started, I ask, make sure that folks, please turn off your microphones. So mute yourself so there's no like background noise. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm really thankful for all of you guys being on my committee. And I was kind of thinking about the impact that you guys have had on my research. And I came up with little, like Michael, I feel like you've been a bit of a magnifying glass for me as I've gone through and have done my research. You have given me some focus in being able to say, hey, here is like kind of go this way, do this. Caribou, you've really been an open book for me and just kind of supporting me and kind of giving opportunities for like, this is how to come and do this type of work and how to come and do participatory action research. And I'm very thankful for that. And Doug, you've really been able to be kind of a map. I feel like you have encouraged me to go deeper. And so I really appreciate having you all on my committee. So Michael, you introduced kind of the plan for today. So as a part of my oral defense, I will go through and talk about the problem statement to kind of help acclimate us to kind of what I'm looking at and what my kind of the research basis for my project. I'm going to share about my research questions, some about the theoretical framework, and then I want to provide an overview of the research that I did and kind of making some connections to the research and the questions and activities that we did as a part of my study, talk some about the limitations and the results. And then there'll be that opportunity for questions or concerns and then the deliberation. So trauma is impactful. And I really want to start by kind of talking about this basis of my research and that trauma is frequent in our schools and it has a significant impact on our students. Over the years, I've worked with kids in all manner of difficulties and challenges. I've worked with students attempting to lead gang life. I've worked with survivors of verbal, physical, sexual assault. I've worked with youth and adults who are refugees. I've seen the aftermath of the genocide that took place in Rwanda. There are lots of forms of trauma that our students go through and things that people have experienced. And I really appreciate the trauma and justice the SAMHSA has a report where a committee called the Trauma and Justice Strategic Initiative, and they define trauma. And I used a lot of their work to come and to understand what is trauma-informed care, what does that look like? And so one of the ways that they define trauma as is an individual trauma results from an event or a series of events or set of circumstances that's experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, and social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And another common metric that we think about when we talk about trauma, one of the, and this is from Folletti originally, but is the adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. And we know that trauma is very frequent. Bethel report that just under half of youth in the United States have one or more ACE, one or more adverse childhood experience. That not only is it frequent, but the more ACEs that a student has, the more likely they are to have emotional, mental, or behavioral concerns. And we also know that trauma and the related experiences are really disruptive to our students' academic and social skills. It can impact their cognitive, academic, social, emotional, behavioral functioning, that it really impacts all of them. And I think that it's important and helpful for us to understand that there's a lot of intersection that happens for our students. And I really think about, as a part of our study, we read through Van der Kolk, his The Body Keeps the Score book, which is really good. And in it, he talks about this idea of developmental trauma disorder and is really making a case that how he was on committees trying to recommend for its inclusion in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. That's what therapists and mental health professionals use to come and to diagnose mental disorders. And he was arguing for the use of this developmental trauma disorder, which is still not a diagnosable condition in the DSM. But there is so much connection between kind of trauma. We think about race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. Many of our students have interactions with the juvenile system. I was really, this last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I was talking with the teacher in the classroom that I work with. And we were just having a conversation about losing students. And there's 4 classrooms that serve students with emotional and behavioral disabilities. There's a fairly high dropout rate, right? Like many of our students do not graduate when you look at kind of those national statistics. I was like, well, we don't, we're doing pretty well in our classroom. We don't have that. And then we started going through a list of names and students that are not with us. And, some of them because they're incarcerated, one that has dropped out this year. And I was like, I guess we are pretty close to those national statistics. And I guess I didn't even realize that. And so it's just so prevalent. And there's this idea of a school to prison pipeline, right? That we have that is talked about in the literature and kind of seen. And that really, when we think about disability, it's multifaceted, that our students are impacted in many ways in many different arenas by their disabilities. And that really something like COVID-19 has been a global traumatic event. And so this leads us to the argument of the need for trauma-informed care practices. And so to define what trauma-informed care practices are, again, I'm going to return to SAMHSA's definition. And so they describe it as a program, organization, or system that is trauma-informed, that it realizes the widespread impact of trauma and it understands potential paths for recovery, recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved in the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, practices, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. So the need to implement trauma-informed care, it includes principles that are outlined by Kavanaugh. And some of the things that we think about kind of why this is important is that students who have experienced trauma need school to offer a safe and consistent environment, that they know what to expect when they come to school, that staff should put particular focus on having positive interactions with students, and that teachers should implement a culturally responsive practice that in their classrooms. And they need to have ways to offer pure interaction and connection using a strength-based approach, that those students can come and be able to connect together. My research focuses on a specific group of school staff who work with some of the most severe behaviorally challenging students. These are ones who qualify for special education services under the category of emotional and behavioral disability, or EBD, and also or have other special healthcare needs. And when we think about this population of students, these students experience an increase in concerns related to ACEs. And his associates describe that they have disproportionately higher rates of adverse childhood experiences compared to their non-disabled peers. That some of the categories that are more likely to come and to impact our students include living with somebody with mental illness, witnessing domestic violence, witnessing or being a victim of neighborhood violence. And we know that students with disabilities and students of colors experience marginalization based on access to quality instruction, school disciplinary practices, special education placement practices, and that a minority of students are disproportionately identified with EBD in schools. And so that again is going back to that intersectionality that we see. And in classrooms that serve these students, there seems to be a higher level of compassion fatigue or burnout. Zian, Goffrey, and Berg use compassion fatigue as a lens to understand the psychological distress that teachers experience working within special education. That there's this idea that we get burnt out and experience secondary trauma. So when we think about compassion and fatigue, that's what we're thinking about, is that idea of burnout and the experiencing of secondary trauma. Hoffman connected the concept of compassion fatigue to understanding burnout for special education teachers. Nationally, there's really a shortage of both special education teachers, and it's highest in classrooms that serve students with emotional and behavioral disabilities, that there's a significant challenge in keeping those students. And all of these problems and concerns are things that need to be addressed in our schools. One of the ways that schools have been working through the process of school reform, right? So there's a lot of kind of discussion, how do we come and create change within a school setting? And one of the ways that is often considered and thought about is this idea of a professional learning community, or PLCs. And Horde in 1997, she kind of describes some characteristics of what makes a PLC. And so some of the characteristics of a PLC is that they have supportive and shared leadership. They have collective creativity, shared values and visions, supportive conditions, shared personal practices. And really, like, there has been fairly broad adoption of PLCs and to enhance schools, but these are almost always focused on academic and curriculum needs. And there are really limited examples of these being used to increase topics such as social emotional learning. And I was unable to find any specific examples of PLCs focused on trauma-informed care practices and using that as an avenue for kind of teaching about these subjects. So when we think about PLCs and their ability to come and to deliver professional development for trauma-informed care, the majority of training and professional development that's around social emotional learning and around trauma-informed care are implemented through traditional methods of professional development. These are often workshop style trainings, and these can be productive. I would still argue that they are really needed, that there is kind of a need to have this group learning. But my research is seeking to find an avenue for professional learning in schools that can be more democratized, that it can be spread out and use a PLC as the model. And I think that there's a space for topics such as social emotional learning or trauma-informed care practices to be a part of staff cycles of inquiry within their PLCs. There have been some examples of kind of that social emotional learning. So Johnson describes a PLC can provide a safe environment where staff can discuss social emotional learning competencies and that can be meaningful for staff. Leonard and Woodland use their PLC to consider social emotional learning and to promote anti-racist ideas. And really, when we think about reflection and being able to learn from reflection action, it's a major component of what's being thought about in educational research. And so there is a lack of examples of PLCs being used to support the development and implementation of trauma-informed care classrooms and school settings. And that's really kind of where the gap that I've situated my research is thinking about how does this work. In explaining my research, defining the theoretical framework might also help. So first, I grounded my research in a process of systems thinking. We can look at Stroh. He describes systems theory that it helps us to change the things that matter the most, right? We want to address the thing that's at the root of what's going on. And this critical thinking can help determine if a PLC provides a clear and worthwhile change, which is the research question that I had. And some of the things that we can kind of think about as I went through my research, the co-researchers and I, we use systems thinking to identify and connect kind of some unrecognized elements to be able to say, hey, this is one way of thinking about this problem, that there were patterns that emerged from connections, and that we can kind of follow these archetypes and help us to understand the interactions and parts of the systems, to say, how do these things interact? And we can follow the conditions that help facilitate collective impact, such as building a common agenda, determining a shared measurement, and nurturing continuous communication, and kind of the conditions of that collective impact. And so a significant purpose of the dialogues we engaged in was transformation and thinking about kind of what this looked like. And the transformative paradigm, it fits within kind of participatory action research fits within that transformative paradigm. And as one of its primary intentions is to come into be transformative. So that would be another theoretical framework that I used. And my co-researchers and I sought to transform ourselves in our classrooms, in our schools. We talked about how we can share trauma-informed care practices beyond our group. And this really requires leadership development to be able to develop. And in thinking about how to support our students best, I wanted to help us develop ourselves as leaders. I think that was kind of an important thing. Montori and Donnelly describe transformative leadership as a framework that lets us understand leadership, and that it's something that can be acquired through an emergent process, which the research that I went through and did was really, it was a emergent process that we went through. And that there's a number of ways that it can come and be embodied. So the question my research sought to come and to look at is that this inquiry to determine whether a PLC focused on trauma-informed care practices can create clear and worthwhile changes for teachers serving students with EBD, and subsequently impact their classroom and school through a participatory action research methodology. And I had a number of sub-questions. These are actually related to the themes that we ended up using and as a part of my research group. And we'll go through each of these questions individually and talk about how they were implemented. So what do some of these questions included? What do the co-researchers know about trauma and its impacts? What types of practices do co-researchers already do in their classroom to limit re-traumatization and increase resilience? What are self-care practices of the teachers, and how do they manage secondary trauma? What practices can develop together to promote change within their classrooms and schools? And what effective systems or recommendations could their co-researchers create to develop similar growth in other schools? So before diving into the actual setup of the study, I also want to clarify what is participatory action research. Creswell describes the participatory action research, or PAR, is a qualitative methodology that includes collaboration at all levels of the research process and has the intention to address a social problem that affects an underserved community. So there's three parts that we think about, right? Like one, it's participatory, that the co-researchers participate in reflection about how to grapple with the target problem, both individually and collectively. It's a research process that during the process, the co-researchers develop alliances through planning, implementation, and dissemination of that research. And then action, that there's kind of creating change individually and collectively as a third core component. And that the group collectively decides what actions are necessary to identify the needs. So this is a graphic to come and to show an overview of kind of the whole research process, and we're going to go through each of these phases and talk about them, but I wanted to share kind of this is what the whole thing looks like. So the recruitment phase was the first stage of my research process. And if there are comments in the chat that I need to respond to, I'm not looking at them on my screen. I see that there's a chat bubble that came up.
I'm
but
so sorry.
no, it would be okay. And so people would be able to come and if there is something that I need to respond to, if somebody would tell me verbally. But you guys are welcome to.
Well. That's it. You're doing so well. That's it. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're fine. Well, you guys are welcome to chat. I just wanted to make sure because I'm not going to pull it up and look. Okay, yeah. So the recruitment phase was the first stage of my research process, and I used purposive sampling to focus on staff that work with students with EBD in a self-contained special education classroom, and really this is a pretty specific group of educators and school staff. So I live in the Tri-Cities, Washington, which is Richland, Kennewick, and Pasco. There are 3 school districts that are really close to each other. We're all kind of within 15 minutes of each other. You can get to any of the 3 towns, and together we make a fairly large town, but we're all separate. And each district has a program that focuses on serving this population of students. So Richland has their BEST program. Kennewick has what they call their Tier 2 behavior program. And then I work in the Pasco School District in the Bridges program. And so to do this recruitment phase, I use my professional connections and the school district websites. Oftentimes school districts have a web page that lists staff and kind of where they work and what their email address is. And so I gathered all of the email addresses from all of the different programs, which really turned out to be 10 elementary school buildings and 5 secondary, both middle school and high school. And I sent out emails first to the administrators. So I sent an email kind of explaining what I was doing to all of the admin at each of those schools, as well as at the district. And then I sent an email to all of those teachers and social workers and paraeducators, anybody that I could find who works in those classrooms that had an email listed somewhere. And I just sent out a cold email, which is really a hard way to come and to gather people. And, to come and to give a perspective of how many schools there are across our 3 cities, there are 85 schools, just about, at least when I went through and tried counting them. So it's a very small portion of the population that we're looking at. And as I was preparing and kind of in this recruitment phase, I ended up attending a training locally that was focused on these students in these classrooms, and was able to come and to share a flyer that I created, inviting people for that. And the focus of my recruitment was to invite staff to attend an orientation setting. It was held during Zoom. I had 5 people who came and attended that orientation. I had a couple others that reached out to me outside of the orientation with interest, and I followed up with them via email. And one of the participants that didn't come to the orientation elected to come and to participate. And then one of the people who came to the orientation, she elected not to participate because of time commitments. And kind of thinking about that. And we had this orientation meeting. Kind of during the orientation, I discussed, here's what participatory action research is, its values, tenets, principles, practices. We talked about kind of this whole research process and what it'll look like. We reviewed informed consent. And in total, after the orientation, as we moved into my entry interviews that we'll talk about in a minute, we ended up with 6 total co-researchers. And I consider myself one of those co-researchers. So there's 6 of us total. There's 3 of us that were social workers. There's 2 behavior intervention teachers or special education teachers, and a paraeducator. And before we talk about each co-researcher, I want to define what a co-researcher is, as it's a fairly unique aspect of participatory action research. And in their encyclopedia entry for participants as co-researchers, Balorin defines it as follows. Participants are co-researchers refers to a participatory method of research that situates participants as joint contributors and investigators to findings of a research project. The qualitative research approach validates and privileges the experiences of participants, making them experts and therefore co-researchers and collaborators in the process of gathering and interpreting data. So in this view, I am a co-researcher. I also refer to myself as the primary researcher, as I have taken a leadership role in coordinating and facilitating the group. Data collection, analysis, and then the dissemination is all done by me. And positionality, this idea of kind of where do we connect, is really an important aspect of participatory action research. And I connect and identify in a number of ways in the study. So first, I connect and identify with having traumatic experiences. My father committed a triple homicide before I was born and was later executed by the state of Washington. And this is one aspect that made an impact on my life and had a lot of influence in my decision to become a social worker, to kind of follow the career path that I went. But it was out of that trauma and out of those kind of challenging experiences. And really much of my high school career, I could have potentially been placed in a classroom like the ones that are serving students with EBD. Because of my behavior, I started off in a comprehensive high school, and then I ended up going to an alternative school. And then I actually graduated from like a private boarding school, which is where I ended up making changes in my life. And there was these kind of relationships and connections that I had with some of the staff there that really made me want to change. And so I connect in that way. It's these experiences that made me want to go through into social work and eventually work in classrooms serving students with EBD. I have 8 years of working in a school-based setting with students with EBD, and 5 years prior to that working in community health. I think I have like 17 years though in the helping field, because I did some of this before I actually got my degree too. Like the other two social workers, I have my master's in social work. They aren't, but I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker in Washington State. I work in a high school behavior program, and I am placed full-time in that classroom. I support kind of the therapeutic milieu of that classroom, and I get to work individually and in groups with the students who are in my program. I also previously supported my program K-12. I spent some time working in a special education school ran by a counseling agency that's focused on the same population of students. And I'm also an adjunct faculty for a university teaching social work classes. So my positionality puts me as an insider researcher. I think that's also kind of a clear thing. And it's really a benefit, right? Colgan and Shania describe that insider action research offers a unique perspective on systems precisely because it's from the inside, that there's this kind of opportunity to share, this is what it looks like. I asked each of my co-researchers to choose their own pseudonyms for this study. And so the following are the co-researchers that I had. First, I had two social workers, Luna and Shaniqua. They respectively have 3 and 4 years experience working in their programs. Luna works for a high school program that has 2 classrooms connected to it. Shaniqua works in an elementary setting that has 2 classrooms connected to it as well. They are both in and out of their classrooms frequently and do group and individual services with their students. When I asked them to talk about their roles and positions at their school, Shaniqua said, I love spending time with my students each day, and talked about the one-on-one work that she does with them. Luna explained that she tries to meet students where they are. Second, there were two special education teachers, Angelica and Emily. Both of them have their special education teaching credentials and are certificated teachers. Emily came from another district where she has 7 years of experience in teaching students in a self-contained life skill setting. So it's a program that's focused a little bit more on students with kind of more cognitive disabilities, although they still have behavioral problems, but it's different. And this was her first year working in a program focused on students with behavioral disabilities. She described, I just love working with the kids that need the most support. I sometimes think of it as a puzzle. And Angelica is another teacher who participated in the group. She described that people always tell me I should go work in a resource room because of her age. She explained that she waited until her kids were grown and out of the house before starting her teaching program. She had 6 years of teaching in a behavior program. She was a paraeducator for 14 years in similar programs. Both the teachers work in elementary settings. Finally, kind of the last member of our dialogues that we did was Marie. And she told us that I love the work that I do at this job. She was a paraeducator in an elementary program, and she's been doing the same work for the last 2 years. She has a bachelor's degree and is a current student actually working on her master's in social work. Power dynamics are an important topic when it comes to talking about participatory action research, and really it's an important aspect of this study. And this is especially true when the primary researcher has prior experience and connections with the co-researchers. I've worked collaboratively with Angelica in the past, and we've shared students. And in my role as an adjunct faculty at the university, I was one of Shaniqua's and Luna's teachers as they worked on their bachelor's in social work before going on to their MSW program. Grant and his associates, they have a chapter in a handbook for participatory research that talks about relationships and power and kind of what does that look. And they provide a number of strategies to explain how to come and to manage power. And so I want to go through a couple of the strategies and how I implemented those. So one of the strategies they describe is to view research projects as a learning opportunity for all. And really, I was an active participant in the discussion. I did get to take the responsibility for creating the agenda and facilitating the discussion, but I learned a lot through the process. And it was really a collaborative approach. I'm going to be kind of sharing some examples of some new or novel ideas that were generated. And there were opportunities for all of us as co-researchers to come and to be vulnerable as we went through kind of this process. And it was really an emergent process. And I think that kind of emergent nature of this helps identify that as well. Another strategy is to demystify the research process. And this was what we did during our orientation meeting, right? That we kind of focused almost exclusively on demystifying that research process. A third strategy is to encourage the involvement of all the stages of the process and increasing control. And so we had individual entry interviews. I developed the agendas based on those meetings, and the members would often bring up ideas and directions they wanted the conversations to go. And we would often have kind of conversations where they would come and call out things like, hey, can we talk about this? Or maybe we should discuss this, or maybe this can be something that we move on to and to talk about. So before we go into the actual group sessions, I conducted an entry interview with each of the co-researchers. During these sessions, we talked about each of the themes we would talk about. We brainstormed how we could learn about these topics. During these entry interviews, we also talked about what book we would plan to read together and some potential self-care ideas. And there were a number of things that were embedded across each of the sessions that we had. We had 6 sessions, and those included a group book study, self-care activities, and exploration, reflection, and action. So each week we spent time reading from Van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is actually, it's a really excellent book. I'd highly recommend it for anybody wanting to learn more about trauma and its impact. And each week after we would review the norms, I would prompt my co-researchers to share what stood out in the readings, things that inspired more in-depth consideration, and other thoughts and comments about the book. This included having a book study that we provided together, gave us an opportunity to have some really in-depth conversation. And sometimes there was at least one meeting that we ended up spending quite a bit of time talking about the book and kind of really considering that. We also participated in self-care activities each week as a group to kind of embed that in the actual dialogues that we were having. So one week we practiced box breathing. We did an activity around activating the vagus nerve. We did a gratitude free ride activity. We spent time going through and kind of doing round robin sharing about how we maintain balance and have self-care in our lives. We talked about how we can use debriefing in the classroom to as a type of self-care. We spent time brainstorming self-care practices, and we did a 5 senses exercise. Also embedded into each session was the PAR methodology and exploration, reflection, and action. So this is oftentimes referred to as kind of a braided process that we think about. McIntry describes this process includes exploration, reflection, and action, right? And this means that we start with questioning a particular issue, reflect on investigating that issue, develop an action plan, and kind of implement that plan. And so each week as we were going through, there would be examples and case studies, and the teachers or social workers would share, hey, this is something that's happening with the student. And we would go through a process where we would talk about that issue, reflect, kind of investigate on it, come up with a plan for how we can come and be able to address that, and talk about how things went afterwards sometimes as well. So that's really kind of the research process. Kind of the bulk of what happened during the 6 weeks of co-design sessions, where I took the notes and ideas from my entry interviews, and I developed agendas. And the themes that we talked about during those weeks is to understand how trauma impacts students. We talked about how limiting re-traumatization within the classroom and what that can look like. We talked about methods for increasing resiliency factors for students. We talked about engaging in self-care and burnout prevention to reduce the impact of secondary trauma. We talked about evaluating and implementing ideas for promoting systematic changes within the classroom and school-wide. And we talked about developing a tool or recommendation for how other school staff could create similar growth within their classroom. It's kind of, I wanted to also provide kind of a caveat or a note to talk about kind of the content in these sessions. And so during the entry interviews, there were a great number of ideas that came up. Many of them were included in the agendas for this session, but not all of the ideas made it onto the agenda. I was pulling from each of the co-researchers and compiling those ideas. I knew that time would be limited for our sessions, and I used my experience to pick out what seemed to be the best content to discuss each week. Sometimes during the session, we would not make it through all of the material as well. I had put on the agenda, I had kind of created, here's our idea of all the things that we're going to go through and do, and we didn't make it through everything each week. And for the purpose of our work together, it seemed best to follow the conversation to where it went and to allow it to be led by the co-researchers. This kind of goes back to that idea of it being an emergent process. And it meant that, sometimes we came back to material or we didn't cover it. And in this attempt to draw out and seek emergent ideas, I think that this requires some degree that the agenda become a guideline and that the co-researchers kind of become the learning tool together, right? Like that you kind of trust that group process as you're going through. And really, like, each of these themes are incredibly deep. right? You could, for the purpose of the study, we limited the number of sessions to 6, but I could imagine spending multiple sessions talking about each of the themes, just because there's so much kind of content and ideas. To analyze the data, I use session notes. So I compiled the agendas that we use, notes that I took during the session, information from collaborative tools. We used Google Docs and chat as we were going through. I spent time reflecting after the session and then going through and processing and refining those notes after each of the sessions. And then to come and to actually analyze the data, I processed those notes. I started calling out some of the themes. I put some organizational structure to be able to say, this is what that looked like. And I added some highlights and comments to help kind of organize that information. I ended up adding it to a mind map to kind of help me see some of those visual connections. And then I started writing the dissertation and going through it. So some of the things that came out of this, I think that there were kind of 2 foundational aspects that really appeared through these sessions and seem important because they're really different than most other PLCs. One is that we function as a type of support group following a mutual aid model. And 2, we came together to work in an interdisciplinary work group. The literature around PLCs rarely focuses on mutual aid aspects of a PLC. In examples, when they do discuss it, it's usually focused on like connecting resources, supplies, and kind of that aspect of mutual aid, and not the emotional support that we think about in support groups. Group members shared that they felt like our group was a support group. You know, one of our members went through and said, hey, like she just called it out and said, it's like a support group. Angelica said that I don't have a place that I feel comfortable. And she talked about how kind of that connection and being in our group was a place that she was able to come and to be able to feel comfortable. That there's this being able to have a similar mindset. Yeah. When we think about kind of the second aspect that I think is really a foundational aspect is this idea of it being an interdisciplinary PLC. So when I look at, again, the research around interdisciplinary meetings in schools, there are a lot of interdisciplinary teams that happen in schools. So IEP teams, which is individualized educational programs, multi-systems support teams. I'm on a behavior team at my school. Like those are all oftentimes multidisciplinary. But when we talk about PLCs, they almost always are siloed and almost always focused on teachers. There are some examples of like, here's a PLC for just social workers. And us having a group made up of teachers, social workers, and a para seemed really helpful. Oftentimes, group members would comment like, oh, as a social worker, I think this, or as a teacher, this happened. And there was just a connection to it. And I use the term interdisciplinary as different than multidisciplinary. That's something that also comes up a lot. And I think about it, I like Chow and Pak's definition and description, and they talk about it having this kind of blurring of disciplinary boundaries, and that you're generating new and common methodologies and perspectives as a benefit. One of the takeaways, and there's a couple of kind of learning strategies I want to come and to share. So first, one of the learning strategies is this idea of kind of cohesion development and meaning making. So there were many times that our group was vulnerable with each other. They shared examples. You know, during one of the sessions, Angelica's told us about kind of the story that we later referred back to as a backpack story. And Emily actually came at a later session and said, hey, like you sharing that made it so that we all feel like we can come and be able to share. I think that there was a really kind of strong openness of being able to come and to connect, and sharing these practical examples really seemed important and for the growth that happened. Some other things that we kind of did as a process for learning is we developed some working definitions. So we developed kind of our own definition of what is trauma, what is re-traumatization, what does resilience look like. We spent time identifying concepts. So we would talk about a subject. So we talked about like, what is bullying look like, and what are kind of all of the aspects that we can think about, kind of understanding it and being able to do it. And there was a lot of sharing of personal challenges. People were able to, they talked about their own kind of individual things that were going on, things with their families, but there was a lot of kind of, these are things that we've gone through. Another learning strategy that we used was idea generation. This idea that we could come and brainstorm and draw out information. One of the things that we use several sessions is SAMHSA has another kind of document that it's the Trauma-Informed Care and Behavioral Health Services. It's a manual set out by the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment. And really great information focused on behavioral health services, not K-12. But we took some of the strategies and implementations of content there and translated it into K-12. So to what does this look like in school? So when they talked about how do we develop resilience, we talked about how do the same strategies that they have, during week 3, we reviewed 7 strategies that they suggested for increasing resilience by counselors. And then we went through and we translated those to what does that look like in a school-based setting. And we did that in a number of different aspects to be able to help frame some of our discussion and to get us thinking about what does this look like for our students. Developing a list of ideas for implementation. Often we just kind of brainstormed ideas. When we defined kind of what trauma is, we also came up with this list of just like a bulleted list of here are a bunch of different things that connect with trauma. And then there's that brainstorming allowed us to kind of discover some new and novel ideas, things that are not traditional talking points. I have kind of a picture that says, "This is my bad day shirt," but that was from a conversation that happened within one of our dialogues, that one of our group members shared that she has a bad day shirt, and it actually became a whole subject. And there's a lot of things that might not be considered like normal professional development that can come about using some of these. We can also kind of the last learning strategy I want to go through and talk about is kind of sharing innovative and creative strategies. So we had one of our teachers kind of share this example of their kids sitting in a box to come and get them to do math. They had like a little bin, and the kid ended up being able to sit in there. But there was a lot of creative ideas and things that are like that worked in this instance, and being able to hear those examples from each other helped us all to come and to grow our own practice. There was a lot of kind of movement of like really specific ideas to say, how does this generally apply, or what are some other things that we could do? So for example, we spent time talking about transitioning students and what that looks like. And, you know, one of the social workers shared about having a student moving up to the middle school and how she went and bought a lock for that student because the student was anxious about how do you come and use the combination lock. They'd never used that. And so they bought that and they practiced it together so that they would be ready. And that wasn't something for them to be anxious about. But that discussion about transitions led to people sharing about like using social stories, people talking about using tours, meet and greets, lots of different kinds of things. We can also think about this professional socialization as kind of reviewing skills, values, professional identities, and attitudes. And we went through in each of the sessions and, you know, like talked about what does that look like. We were able to talk about our values being like having a safe learning environment for our students. We were able to talk about this kind of professional idea and identity of all being social emotional teachers, and kind of this idea that each person in our classroom is kind of a teacher counselor. They all get to come and take over different roles. We talked about our attitudes and being able to have strategies for downplaying comments. So I want to share a little bit about some of the limitations. I'm going to get through if there's kind of questions about like how this directly applied in each of the sessions. I could go back to some of that. I'm going to skip through some of that, as I know the kind of the idea is to have this portion be about 45 minutes. But I do have other slides that could go through and talk about what we did each session, and then also connect kind of the research questions to what specifically happened within like how we talked about each of those and kind of what were some of the connections between each research study. But I want to talk a little bit about the limitations. So this study is really meant to be exploratory, right? It was meant to come and provide insight and to be kind of a potential model for how this could work and what a PLC talking about trauma-informed care could look like. I think that the group composition is also a limitation. Maybe I'm biased because I really valued and appreciated the group that I worked with, and I just had a phenomenal team of people that came together, and I know that that's not every group, right? And so it's hard to say if it's just because of this great group of people coming together. I will also say that this research did not focus on any external measures or processes, and it would really benefit from having some tools to be able to say, to maybe measure some things. We did use, we used the professional quality of life screener to measure our compassion fatigue, but there's other tools, things like the attitudes related to trauma-informed care. And I think that there's maybe a need to say, how do we think about trauma and some of those to be able to actually measure some of that as well. And this is true for most studies that include qualitative research, that there's a potential ambiguity that happens, right? There's potential misunderstanding, and there's a lot of storytelling and self-report that was involved in the study. And so that's another limitation. And really, it doesn't evaluate the program or implementation of trauma-informed care practices, which I think is another area that is kind of a limitation. So during one of the sessions, Shaniqua was talking about kind of how there's all these staff that come and always want to come and fix students, right? They come up to us and they say, and this was a universe, like all of us felt like we've had people come up and feel like, oh yeah, you just need to come and fix this student, which is not our perspective. We don't think like, hey, we're going to fix this kid or whatever. But when she was talking about that, she described this feeling of feeling like my wand is broken. I felt like it was just such a impactful way of kind of thinking about it. And during the sessions and kind of through some of the kind of conversation, the co-researchers described that they felt like the work that they did in these dialogues was beneficial and were encouraged by the process. Luna said, I got a little bit of my, we're going to change the world back as we were going through this conversation, which I think is just a powerful thing, right? To say like, hey, I'm a little bit burnt out. And, you know, Marie talked about feeling burnt out, that she said, I think I'm just burnt out from life, and I think that's bleeding into my work. And to be able to have some encouragement and to move forward. I think that Angelica summed it up in kind of this way of saying that she felt like she could come and be able to call anybody and to have a connection that she felt supported. And I think that that feeling supported is really important, and that this type of process, going through and helping talk about trauma, helping connect with each other, can really be beneficial for our staff. And this is a graphic I'm not going to go through. We talked about these parts. These were kind of all of the parts of my study compiled into one graphic, but the thing I want to kind of leave this conversation thinking about, or kind of talking about, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. But when I was doing the orientation meeting for this group, one of the members came, and she ended up not coming and participating, and described that it was because of the time commitment. But during the meeting, she had thought that what that orientation was I was going to come and explain this is trauma-informed care, and that was going to be the training, right? That the orientation was going to be the training. And she's like, oh, she didn't realize that it was going to be this PLC style group, that we were going to come and have these ongoing meetings and to go through and do it. And I think that is true for a lot of educators, that we don't think about this being a way that we come and learn about some of these topics. And what my hope is that this project will be an avenue for people to have new ways of learning and thinking about trauma-informed care practices, that it's something that can be more grassroots and spread out, that I think that there's a need to come and have more formalized professional development as well, but that there's a need to talk about it together and to really learn from each other, because in our classrooms, there is a whole wealth of experience and knowledge. Yeah, so thank you guys very much. And I guess I'll open it up for questions or see how that goes. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
All right. Thank you, Jacob, for that beautiful presentation. Both visually and the content was wonderful as well. So I would like to open this up to first the committee, and then hopefully maybe we'll have a little bit of time for some other questions and comments as well. But maybe I'll ask Karubo to start, if she can. Okay, great.
Wow, thank you, Michael. Jacob, thank you so much for wonderful, wonderful presentation, and congratulations. You've worked really hard. Just thinking about our first conversation about doing a PAR study and where you are today is just amazing to see the progress that you've made. I really must say this was a very well done PAR study on many levels. I think we may have talked about some of those things, but I just wanted to point out really your process, your research process, and the way you implemented it meets all the critical components of a PAR study. So congratulations and well done, Jacob. Just to outline, yeah, you're welcome. Just to outline some of the critical areas that you met. It's very clear that you co-designed critical aspects of this study with your co-researchers through your entry interviews and integrating that feedback and involving them in the decision-making processes at various stages of your inquiry. So that's great. That's good PAR practice. So well done on that. Your study was collaborative in nature, interactive. Your outcomes, clearly your process and outcomes were emergent and exploratory. That's PAR. Well, I could also tell that you had you gave your co-researchers the opportunity to voluntarily, share their intentions or their intent to move forward. This shows that they found the study valuable, to them. I think we've seen some of the quotes that you've shared. So this was valuable to them as individuals, as persons, as humans participating in the study with you, but also for their work. I think it was clear from what you've presented, but also after reading your dissertation. And also they see the potential of your work to enable change, the change that they desire and that you desire. So this is wonderful. And so clearly I see that your PR study, through this study, you're able to answer your study, your questions, your research questions, whether a PLC can be a vehicle or platform for professional development, for trauma-informed care and practices in a school context. So it's clear that you were able to answer that research question through your study. It's wonderful that you very clearly stated your positionality to this work. You know, what we can see what brings you to this work and to this study. So as a social scientist, as an insider participatory action researcher, this is really important, and it helps make the connection with the people that you're working with, your co-researchers and people that are interested in your work. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you too for taking your personal experiences of your adverse childhood experiences and transforming those into a passion for change for other students. So thank you, Michael, for that. That's really important. And that's also the essence of PAR. It's about transcending the challenges that we face, especially as an insider researcher. So I'd be curious to know what this experience was like for you, given that this also comes from a very personal space, and it also comes from a place of trauma, you know, a history of trauma. So maybe, you know, when we get to the question point, I'd love to hear what that experience was like for you. And from a PR standpoint, it's okay to also share your reflections about your experience as an insider researcher, given that this work weaves into your life, you know? We'll get to that. That's just one of the questions I'd be curious. And this comes from really also from a place of care and understanding, to say that it's okay. With PAR, it's okay to share how you feel. It's okay to write our feelings and our emotions. This is PAR. It gives us that, you know, that space for that. And that built into PAR is not value neutral, it's value laden. And I think you were able to accomplish this. You outlined in your assumptions what you brought to the study in terms of the assumptions that you held, the different areas that you outlined. And also I can tell that PAR, the way you conducted PAR, it shows that PAR really was a fitting methodology for your inquiry. You talked about the action, about the learning and reflection, the use of dialogue. You talked about, you've shown how co-learning really took place, how you build trust, how you created a container and held a safe space for your participants or co-researchers to really show up authentically and to be able to be vulnerable. And with you as part of that process, you can tell trust was built, there was empowerment, you made some really deep connections with your co-researchers and amongst yourselves. So that again, it takes skill as a PR researcher really to be able to do that, because sometimes, you know, people are not able to accomplish that, especially when we're talking about processes or experiences that involve, you know, deep aspects of trauma. So as you said, your co-researchers, like you, through your work, working in this space, you experience secondary trauma. I did see from your dissertation, sometimes, you know, people cried, you said people laughed. Yep. That's wonderful, because you create space for whatever needs to emerge and just hold it in care so that it emerges and those participating are able to move forward in a meaningful way to create trust and meaning. And to find ways, you know, as you say, to think together, to learn together for change. So dialogue always, you know, also gives you that that framework to be able to do that. So that was awesome. So I see there was authenticity in the way your process emerged. So congratulations. There's a lot more I can say really from a PR standpoint, but I just want to share, I think this was a very well executed PR study. So congratulations, Michael. Now, in terms of some points of further reflection and consideration, they're really not questions, but just some things to think about. But if you feel that you'd like to respond, that should be okay. So how do you prefer me to go? So do you want me to go through this? Maybe you'll just note down the questions and then you can respond? I think, would that work better for you?
How about
what do you think?
yeah, so this is Michael. So I wanted to say that maybe what we'll do is ask Doug just for some general sort of observations first, and then I will make mine, and then we can get into actual questions.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Doug, sure, thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Dr. Abuya Karubo. I will echo what you said. What came across, I think, most clearly to me in both your kind of design phase, but also in the responses to the conditions you created in this study, that folks were willing to be honest and share really heartbreaking stories and heartwarming stories and laughter. And it really came through. And sometimes it doesn't come through when you're reading words on a page. It doesn't come through, but you did a really great job of really forwarding the voices of your colleagues in this really difficult space. And having worked in those spaces myself for most of my career, I know it's emotionally laden. I think as I was reading through your findings, but also your lit review and your framing and your theoretical framing, you know, this particular group of students and adults that you selected and you really made your career around is so laden with overrepresentation. You know, boys of color, boys who don't speak English, students who are given the trauma label. Sometimes teachers do a lot with that. That just reinforces a lot of stereotypes. Students with special needs, students in EBD. These are all like each of them on their own, but you're actually piling them all up in this really, really risky intersectionality space. And I think as I'm reading, I'm just really skeptical of quick overgeneralizations and I love that idea of the wand. When people, you know, teachers come to SPED teachers like this, it's so laden with deficit thinking that these children are broken and ignoring that schools themselves are not neutral spaces. Schools themselves are places of trauma, like delivering trauma, not just caring for kids who've been through tough things, but are actually reinforcing trauma. And as I read through your work, I was just really impressed, Jacob, by your sensitivity to that and your provision of a really careful space around that trauma is not binary. You're either traumatized or you're not, but it's actually a really complicated phenomenon. And I would say the same for resilience, that resilience is itself laden with privilege and laden with all kinds of stuff. So you handled all of those things, I think, very appropriately. And I mean that as a human being. I also mean as a researcher and a scholar that you did a really nice job of recognizing the sophistication and the systematic that this stuff's structural. It's not just about individual people with opinions. It's all influenced by structure, and you did a really, really good job. I was just blown away by it. And so in addition to your personal story and your journey through this, I think you did a really amazing job of that. So my main question is around generalization and just your professional next steps, how to take the powerful experience that you created for your co-researchers. What might be some implications for other teachers who are similarly situated, other paraeducators, and taking your findings to other schools, other districts. Really excited to hear about that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I mean, I have very similar response as both Doug and Karubo, so I won't say too much more other than things I had written down were just, you know, that the thing I circled most, I said, human. You really got to the humanity and sort of the group that you're working with. So it was so much more than just a professional development piece that as we think of, but it really sort of reframes what a PLC, professional learning community, can be. and I want to change it to professional and something else learning community that really sort of transcends what the notion of a PLC. So I'm very much interested also in Doug's question for you, because that was sort of my main question: is how can this be sort of promoted, fostered within your district, other districts, within the system that that tends to beat people down a bit. One of my students in another program, she is in a similar role to yours. And that's all she wants to really focus right now. She's not at the dissertation stage quite yet, but it's all about feeling very beaten down, and she wants to leave that career. She's done with it after 5 years. And she wants to maybe write about that. And I said, well, can we figure out a way so rather than being beat down all day and then come home and research about feeling more beaten down and burned out, is there some shift? So this PLC idea, I think, is something that maybe I might share with her. So very inspiring too, that, I worked really closely with you, and, understand the timing of this was, around COVID was just, it was, did you start your research? Like, basically, I think that you were approved, or you started doing this planning, like schools were shut down at that point, right? And you were trying to figure out how to make it work. Mm-hmm. You got COVID, your family, it's just been very, very difficult. And you just kept going and creating beautiful work. So I appreciate that. So maybe we can start, we'll go back to Karubo, but maybe go ahead and if you could respond to Doug's question about the implications and what's next, because that's sort of my question as well.
Yeah. So I think around some of the implications of this, or kind of generalizability, this is not a study that can say this is the perfect system, right? Or that this is the way that things are going to go. That's not the type of study that this is. It's very exploratory. It felt really good, I guess, going back to what Karubo said, and kind of asking about kind of the feelings and participating in it. And like myself as a co-researcher, I felt empowered. I felt really connected with my group members. There was like camaraderie and being able to share. One of the kind of when you think about mutual aid groups, one of the kind of terms that they use, they talk about them being kind of this perspective of all in the same boat, right? That there's this like feeling like we're all connected. And there was that, right? Like I was able to come and to say, these are my people, right? These are the people that I can connect with, and that I like, we have similar experiences, and that feels very empowering. And I think that it is a really positive model. So one of the kind of the sixth session we talked about, we went through and spent time talking about like, hey, like where could this go? What could we need? And some of the feedback that my group members said is that they felt like there needs to be some sort of like a cookbook or something, like something that could say, how could you do this in other schools, right? Like, how could you come and implement this? Like, if I was going to go back and work with the staff at my school, because they were at different buildings and in different schools, like, what could I just have a menu of options to come and to pick from, to be able to say, here are some ideas of topics around this, and here are some things and activities that we can do related to this, and to be able to develop that. And I know as far as like next steps or things that I would like, that's something that I would like to come and work on developing some. I want to we've talked about some of these things within my classroom with like the teacher that I work with and my para, but I would like to go through like this same process with them. I know that as well, my co-researchers, and I just did not have the capacity this year to continue having like another meeting and to have like to continue facilitating a group, but they all wanted to continue doing it this year, right? And I didn't want to just have it be something where we just showed up and just talked, which I think is also beneficial. But I did feel like it took a lot of preparation to kind of get everything ready and to go through and to have a really engaged group. And I didn't want to continue having that, but I do know that the co-researchers talked about wanting to continue doing it this year. And I just have been too focused on saying, how can I write this and how can I come and make it through the rest of this process? So those are some of the next steps that I see. But I think it's something that should be shared. I would love to, like, my research is not directly related to social emotional learning, but I feel like that is really connected as well. That I think that these groups that meet within school should be talking about these topics, right? They should be talking about how they can come and be anti-racist. They should be talking about how they can come and engage in social emotional learning. They should be talking about how can we come and approach students in a way that's going to come and respect them and to make them feel safe and to provide a trauma-informed perspective for them.
Doug, do you have any response to that? I'm sure that part of what you do and is constantly trying to work with groups and with educators and creating those spaces. So I'm just wondering what your response is to Jacob.
I think it's just to get like the writing you've done is exhaustive and you're very careful, and the bar for getting the essence of this out to practitioners is, to me, is a lot lower. Writing concisely is really hard, but I would just encourage you to build into your plan for the next 6 months of your life, you know, a couple hours on the weekends to take this and get it out, get that 3 to 5 pager, you know, that a group of adults could, at a special ed department meeting, could read through in 20 minutes and go, gosh, oh yeah, but, you know, the fact that it is an exploratory, you know, the study, this kind of descriptive analysis stuff, it is generalizable. You're not, you know, it's the kind of study where there are big takeaways. The kind of quotes you include in your deck, which was, by the way, really beautiful and easy to follow. It's so rare to see something like that adds to the discussion. But those quotes in an article in front of practitioners, you know, especially with this ongoing crisis around retention of these, your colleagues, our colleagues who are doing some of the hardest work out there, you know, working with kids who've just been ill-served for 15 years, you know, showing up in your classroom and the teachers expect you to, like, you know, do something that takes them off the hook, you know. And I think, so I would just say, encourage you to, like, what are those nuggets, things that your participants said, that you could boil down to, you know, 5 to 7 like key takeaways and even recommendations. The work you've done is really, really important. And the voices, your own voice, but also the voice of your colleagues, they need to get out there. This is a group of people that, you know, are often left in the portable, figuratively, but also not given a lot. They don't give the microphone very often. And so your you know, your positionality is also about to shift again, Dr. Campbell. And so you can leverage that to get these important ideas in front of those people. So I would just encourage you that the validity is immense and the story is powerful. And with time, I've also felt that the more months and years that go by, your dissertation is gonna get a little bit further away as your life just evolves. And so while it's fresh, capture it and get it out into some kind of some broader audience. I would just encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Karubo, let's come back to you now.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, thanks, Dag. Excuse me. Thanks, Dag, Jacob. Thanks, Michael, for your comments. I echo, the sentiments you've given. Now, Michael, you talked about one of the limitations you pointed out that it was exploratory. I would love to understand that, because indeed a PAR study is supposed to be exploratory. So it'd be nice to hear why you felt that the fact that the study was exploratory was a limitation in the study. So that's just one question that came up just after you shared the limitations, because indeed PAR is supposed to be emergent, exploratory, just as your study shows. I think you created room for that beautifully, for it to unfold as an emergent process, which is great. You did not rush to just stick to the agenda, but you held space for whatever needed to emerge, and you incorporated your participants' voices and where they wanted to go at whatever moment. So that was great. So that's how PAR really supposed to unfold. So that's just one question really that has come up for me. One of the questions that came up from your review. There are just two other things I would like to share, perhaps as just points of reflection as you move, you take your work into the world. You talked about fundamentally you want your study to be able to improve or to have an impact on school culture. As you move forward, I think there wasn't much address around school culture as such, but looking at a school setup as an organization, so we're looking at some aspect of organizational change. But this change appears that it's a change that starts with the classroom based on the teacher's professional development, and through their practices, they would impact the school culture. So perhaps as you think, as you move forward to think how you want to move your work forward, think about what components of the school culture are you looking at that will be impacted by this process. So this is a rhetorical question. You don't really need to do that. But if you feel that you want to respond, you can do that, because culture comes with many aspects. It could be their symbols, their rituals in the cultural aspects, their values that we are looking at. There's language, there's just different components. So I know this is a preliminary process of your PR study that you want to move forward. But as you move forward, as you work with your PLC, those are some of the things to look at. So based on our experience, if we want to, have an impact on school culture, what aspect of the school culture do we want to change or to improve to integrate the trauma-informed? So that's just one aspect of my question. And the other, it's really not a question, it's more of just a point of reflection. And to think about how you can further move forward with the, applying an intersectionality lens. It's wonderful to see that you're thinking about those different aspects of race, ethnicity, color, class, disability, all those just different areas, perhaps gender, age, so as you move forward with your study, it would be interesting to engage your co-researchers and other people that you bring into this work to look at those different areas of intersection and looking at those the power dynamics also that come into play. So perhaps something you may want to consider, perhaps incorporating the intersectionality, critical theory as part of your theoretical frameworks as you do this work, going forward. The school, to prison pipeline, there's a lot of literature on that. So it's wonderful to leverage that, continue leveraging that to see how this work could go forward to impact the greater or the broader ecosystem of the learning community, beyond the classroom, beyond the school community, but really looking at the system, expanding that system, your system's boundaries to incorporate those aspects, so that, for example, the students of color that are predominantly, pushed out of the school system into the juvenile justice system, because we're showing that their disruptive behavior is largely because of emotional and behavioral disabilities, but then they don't have that support. So as you move forward, so if you could find ways to incorporate critical theory, the intersectional in a deeper sense, but this is a wonderful start for your work. And lastly, it'd be wonderful to share about, as an insider researcher, what was emerging for you in terms of what challenges did you experience? Did you have any moments of surprise? You know, what were those eye-opening moments perhaps that came up for you? And any surprises along the way, you could reflect around that. And those are good to also include as reflections, you know, as part of your work as a participatory and inside a participatory action researcher. So that's all from my end. Thank you.
So can I respond to that? Is that awesome? Thank you very much. Appreciate kind of those questions and the feedback. Hopefully I'll be able to go through and respond to quite a bit of that. So you asked about it being exploratory and why I listed that as a limitation. I guess one of the reason why I guess I think of that as a limitation is maybe just some of my background and experience. I feel like when I was not in my this PhD program, but in my master's and bachelor's program, social work often focuses on more quantitative data, right, and being able to kind of look at some sort of causality or some of those kinds of things versus that qualitative focus. And I guess just thinking about that, there's not like a causality with any of this, right? Like I can't say it's just this or there, and there was no, it was just the members' responses and their explanations that made it feel that they described it being a beneficial process. And so that to me made it more exploratory, and why that would be a limitation, which and not to say, because I don't feel like any of these limitations are necessarily like a bad thing, or like it's not like a ding to say just because there's like potential that the group could be changed, right? And that group process. But I think it's something, it's a factor to be aware of. I guess when I think about those limitations, is there things that we should be kind of thinking about and aware that this impacts how we think about this research and how we think about things moving forward and kind of the effect of it. You also asked about kind of school culture and the connection there. Yeah, I did not include a whole lot of discussion about school culture is really a large topic. There is a really large literature base around school culture and things that impact school culture, how we go about thinking about school culture, how it changes, how school culture can be evaluated and researched. Often my understanding, and Doug or Michael, one of you would probably, you might be able to even explain a little bit better some of this, but there is a lot of like, I know that there's a lot of like screenings and more quantitative tools that are oftentimes implemented when schools talk about school culture, to be able to say, what are staff attitudes? How do they really think about this? In my own district, at each one of our meetings, we have like a temperature check. So they have like a Microsoft form, and staff get to say, this is how I feel right now. These are needs that I have, and this is something I wish somebody would follow up on. And so every meeting, the 300 staff in my building, the opportunity to come and to share that. But I mean, that's about like trying to say, how do we come and impact school culture? And so my intention is to say, how can we come and help the staff within kind of that school culture be able to impact back their school culture. So I guess that'd be one way that I think about, but I do think that that is an area that was not addressed in a overly significant format. It's a very kind of broad topic. You also kind of talked about moving forward and thinking about intersectionality and critical thinking. I would really kind of agree with that. I think that there is really rich connections. And I think that for me, that is some of the things that are the most eye-opening. And again, my research was more focused on the staff that work with those students and kind of how do they interact. I'm a big believer that for us to come and to be able to give back to our students, we have to be able to be in a place where we're healthy and where we're doing well. Right, and that the staff have to kind of have their bucket full, and so I think that hearing examples from all the teachers like was really eye-opening and really impactful in my experience. I don't know if I answered all of those questions.
So thank you, Michael. I'm sorry, thank you, Jacob. Yes, you did. And again, this just things to continue thinking as you move forward, especially around culture. I totally agree with you. This is just really the initial beginning process. But as you take your work into the world, just some things to think about and to go deeper. Obviously, you didn't have enough time to be able to address all these components. But I just thought I would mention that because culture is a very important part of how organizations create spaces for, again, still for teachers and for students to be able to excel, and especially within the context that you're looking at with the students with disabilities. So yes, you've answered my questions, but again, these are things that you'll just need to think about forward. But your work is good. This is really good. I think you have a very good foundation to build on and work with your co-researchers, perhaps, to take this forward, to have an impact on students, but also on the teachers and other social workers and staff members that support these students. So thank you so much and congratulations.
Okay, thank you. So I think that looking at the clock, I think it's time I'm going to create a breakout space for Doug and myself and Karubo, and we will go in there, and then so that will be a good 5 minutes or so for you all to speak with Jacob, ask questions, chat. So let me see, I just have to set up this room. So here we go.
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming.
Hey, cohort.
And freaking tastic, Jacob.
Thank you.
Hope you can exhale. I know they're not back yet. I already heard one murmur of Dr. Campbell, but that was just beautiful, and it's just been really so terrific watching your processing your journey.
Thank you. It was hard to know what to all include, because I mean, like when I've been going through and rereading, like to like edit my whole dissertation, I mean, it takes me all day, right? Because I mean, the whole document is like 116 pages, but I mean, it's I think 89 pages of like content, and then like with appendices and some of those and references and all of that. But I mean, it just takes forever, right? Like I couldn't go through, and I even like I had a bunch of slides that I think I cut out today, like 6 slides that I just kind of jumped right past, and then I cut out more yesterday because I went through and kind of practiced. I'm like, oh, this is way more than the 45 minutes that I'm supposed to do.
Well, you really honored it, though.
Yeah.
How long? When did you finish your the group part and then move into the more analyzing or writing, and then moving into like, how long was that process for you? We don't have to spend too much time on that. I just would love to hear about your journey with this.
No, yeah. So in the start of spring semester last year, like for the school district, was when I went through HRCC, and I got approval, and then it was March, and then March I did my recruitment. We had my that meeting and the entry interviews, and then the last 6 weeks of school was when we did the actual trauma-informed PLC. So that's when we had our group meetings, and then I worked on writing it some over the summer, and then a lot more in the fall. And then I only just finished a lot of that writing process and doing the significant portion of it in the last 5 weeks or something like that. Weeks.
Did you do a member check?
There's a lot of process that it's going through, right?
Did you do a member check kind of thing where everybody in the group read your dissertation or read the results of it? Or
so we did when I still have things that I need to go back and edit before I send to the technical review, because that's going to take another 4 weeks, because my plan is to have it go through the publication process. But I was sharing copies of each chapter as I wrote them with Michael, and then when I finished and kind of compiled the whole thing, I shared it with the entire committee and gave feedback. And actually, having the pseudonyms and identifying individual researchers, when I originally went through and wrote it, that was this week that I went through and did that, because I have all of the information of who said what, but the way I had framed it in my actual dissertation was one of the co-researcher teachers or and I didn't refer to anybody by, so I went through and I texted everybody hey, I don't know what to call you, if you want to
so that was
pseudonym. So I let people pick their own, because
wow.
But so I had to, because I got some feedback from and so I tried to make some of those changes, and I need to put it more into that formal writing piece too, and some of it that I've gone through and edited. But that's kind of my plan today, because the technical review, they said, can take up to 4 weeks, and then I have a week to make the changes, and then I have to submit it for CWS, I think. Is that right? The Center for Writing, whatever. Yes. And then they go through and review it and approve it, and all of that. So I'm hoping I don't have a whole lot of technical edits too, but I don't think it'll take too long to fix those things.
Well, it's so exciting just to be able to see you with this process. Of course, I'm interested in your subject. I really like just how you pulled it all together, and I think it can be really helpful for school cultures. So yeah, I just wanted to put a couple cents out there, and thank you for sharing the whole process with us, because we're all going to follow your lead here. So yeah, but it's really exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm just in awe of your capacity to organize and stick to your program and do what you were going to do and not get sidetracked by everything else that's going on and COVID, and that you just kept putting one foot in front of the other and getting it done. And then being able at the end, because I'm sure you've got so much material from these groups, like you said, and just being able to decide what's in and what's out. And that's my problem right now. I'm writing a 1,000-page dissertation, and I might think I have to just write the 1,000-page dissertation and then go back and cut it down if it's manageable, because I can't can't seem to see the clear path right now. So I'm really in awe that you were able to just see the clear path and go and get it done. That's really impressive.
I think some of it has just been trying to limit it. Even limiting our sessions to say we're just going to do 6 sessions, right? Mm-hmm. I could have easily said this will be a lot longer. These are going to be and so I've done a lot of kind of boxing things in to make it hopefully be more manageable and to be able to go through that process. I think that that's been really kind of important to it. But it was hard. Like and I mean, there's a lot of things that we think about, like when you're doing that qualitative research, to say like, how do I actually analyze that? But I mean, I just went through and I kept rereading my notes and like, okay, oh, this makes me think about this. And I started like highlighting things and kind of calling it out. And then a lot of like my clarity came as I was writing about it, that I would say, oh, this is kind of like this. And then I started combining those ideas. It just kind of developed. I don't know.
It's great.
I am a first-year student, so I'm very happy to see and hear about the process before I get so off track. When you started talking about an intersectionality, so that's where I'm there. I'm like, all of those pieces are so valid. I'm like, oh, I can do that. No, I want to do that one. No, I want to, and so yes, I appreciate hearing your process of really just like, this is the one thing that I can do for this particular project, right? Like you have the rest of your career to explore other things like the school culture. But for this project, you just, had to pick something very specific. And I'm just really honored that I get to be here and have a peek at that.
Thank you.
Are you in transformative studies, Nikki?
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, one of the things that I think also helped me as I was going through is, and I mean, in all of the classes, like everything that I wrote was either about trauma, about social work and kind of interaction with like special education, or like it was all in the same arena, right? So, I mean, I feel like in some ways I've been going through the same stuff the last 4 years.
Yeah, and so helped. Some of my interest is in trauma, but also from the parenting point of view. So parents with their own trauma histories, and then trying to kind of protect their children and build resilience that way. And I am curious about, did you have to do anything? And I think one of the members of the committee brought it up, like in terms of your own personal history. I do contract with the child welfare system, and I was finding, at least last semester as I'm researching about things, that it just was so heavy. It felt so heavy. And then with my own personal history and then professional, like how did you take care of yourself as you were doing the research?
I think, well, so around like my own trauma history, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I experienced, especially when I was younger, like I've dealt with a lot already, and are not like, they don't have ongoing impacts. And I mean, it's all stuff that's a long time ago now, and I've been in this field for quite a while as well. I mean, I've been kind of doing helping stuff for like 17 years or something like that, and so I've had to deal with a lot of my own issues. I mean, I definitely had like issues around like feeling inadequate, or like that idea of like, am I an imposter? And like, is this like, am I really, I had to have a meeting with Caribou, I think after the second session, I'm like, am I doing this right? Like, is this really participatory action research? And like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Like, we're just having these group meetings and kind of having these conversations, but I was like, there's all of those kind of issues of inadequacy. And so I feel like those are some things that definitely I came up and I had to deal with, and to just kind of say, this is kind of the right thing. And even though like, and I'm still learning about this, and I think that your perspective about saying, this is what I'm doing right now, I'm going to do this little box, and I have the next however long to continue working on this stuff, is really valid, and is a really good perspective, and what I have tried to also take on, that I'm gonna have a lot of time to dive into other aspects of this or to think about this in other ways. So it's like the start of a journey versus this isn't the end of it, right? This is the beginning.
Thank goodness people have shared that with us over this journey, because right, and I know those of you who I know and my cohort here and friends, like we start out like we want to be like the leader of the rebel forces, we're going to change all this stuff, and then at some point, no, I got to bring it down. Like I wanted to have PhDs and MDs in my study, and I'm like, no, that's a very different journey. I need to think about a postdoc or think about, who knows, 5 years down the road. You know, it was very sane and grounded, and it was a doable, sounded like to you, it sounded like it was a doable study. We'll get more details. Probably everybody in our cohort is going to be trying to like say, tell us how you did it. But really, congratulations, Jacob. Really beautifully done. And of course, you're always the master of the imagery. I mean, you were making these fabulous, you know, infographics from day one. I noticed the Band-Aid on the, the Band-Aid on the magical.
Yeah.
Looks like a lot of fun to do. But anyway, yeah, hope you can relax and your family gets you back in another way. Your kids will go, I remember you.
I do really, like, I have enjoyed this process, but I feel really burnt out by school, right? Like I'm ready to have this phase be over and finished with it. I'm not finished yet, right? I mean, there's still process stuff, but it's, yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
We're back. We're waiting for, hopefully we didn't lose Karubo. I know she was having trouble with her connection. So I'll give one more quick. I hope you had sort of started having good conversation while we were away. Good. Yeah. Here she goes. Here she comes. Okay. So I believe we're all here. So on behalf of the committee, we would like to congratulate you, Dr. Jacob Campbell, for a successful defense of your dissertation. Very happy for you. Yeah, congratulations. There's just, you know, you and I will meet. There's just, you already know sort of some of the stuff you're working on doing some slight revisions, but we're almost there. And congratulations, you made it. So
awesome. Thank you.
Wow.
Congratulations, Mike.
Thank you very much. Oh.
Yeah.
And so but I just, yeah, it's been a phenomenal process to kind of go through and do.
Yeah, and I hope to see you come over to Western Wild. Remember we met at that, it was during COVID, and we went to this little it was like a Starbucks, but we sat outside and we tried to not get too close to each other and to talk about, this is when you're recruiting your participants. Yeah.
No, I'd love that. But I think that's one of the amazing things about this process. And like the three of you guys, like there's this connection that we have now that I hope to be able to stay connected with all of you and to be able to continue to engage because you guys are doing awesome things.
Please do. And okay, well, thank you all for being here, and have a good rest of your Friday. And Jacob, get some rest, and we'll reconnect next week. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great work.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Bye. Congratulations, Michael. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye.
Hi, Lisa.